Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm just doing a quick discussion today. This is partially a mic test as well, that's why I did this. I know I've been a little bit absent. I've been working on some things, um, and it's also been incredibly hot here, so I've been kind of taking it easy. But I wanted to go over something that popped in my head this morning. Before I do it, let me just mention that there may be some background noise because of the heat and the AC going. I'm going to try to reduce that, but it's been tricky reducing it and not causing a distortion effect. So I'll do the best I can, but there might still be some background noise in the final recording here. Um, the topic for today is really what my campaigns for Wandering Heroes of Overgate actually are like, and how I approach the game and what the game is meant for. One problem that I sometimes have is I'm not really great at understanding how the internet works, how blogging and marketing will transmit information to people, how things I say about the game uh, can take on a life of their own. And so, just as an example, I did a post about D&D-isms in Wuxia and in Wandering Heroes of Overgate. And everything I said in the blog post was correct and true to how I run a game, but I think it created the wrong impression of both what Ogre is and what I'm doing at the table. So it's not that Ogre is a game that's meant to be run like D&D. It's a different game, and it's a different setting and a different genre. But I have allowed certain what I call D&D isms to exist in the setting, and most of them are D&D isms that actually exist in Wuxia too. So it's not like I'm talking about taking Wuxia and stripping it down to, or converting it so that it resembles D&D. It's more about finding the points where the Wuxia genre aligns with some of these D&D-isms that are useful for long-term campaign play. So there are things that if you like again, like there's people. I don't know how many people followed Ogre through its development, but it was a passion project, number one, but it was also a product of me watching a lot of wuxia movies and to a ridiculous degree. Like I'm talking hundreds of wuxia movies, where I was blogging about it and bringing that into the game. And when you watch that volume of wuxia, you see patterns that are, I think, more visible than if you're only looking at, say, like the most five known wuxia movies or something, or even like the most known 10 wuxia movies. And something that you notice is that features that are pretty common in a D&D campaign, like a dungeon, like inns, they're part of the genre. They function in their own way, so they're not 100% identical, but they have a home in this kind of a setting. It's an adventure setting, it's a character conflict setting, it's a setting where duty and justice are themes. It's a setting where interpersonal drama is important. It's a setting that can include mystery. It's a setting that can kind of walk the line on some supernatural elements, and so you can bring those in. I think those are the most outside genre stuff that I bring in Overgate is those elements, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the point is just that sometimes I talk about this stuff, and I think it either gets misunderstood or just reduced to something, and so the the reality of what Ogregate is and what my own individual campaigns are, which I would say is a distinct thing from what Ogregate itself is, because Ogregate is more broad, is more complicated than like a blog post. And so I've started to realize that, and so I'm going to talk more at length about this. And also, I haven't put up live plays or anything in a long time, and a lot of times the live plays are kind of a distorted look anyways into how the game functions. But if you want to see how my campaigns operate, you can look at my session logs. In particular, the Bonebreaker, the Disposable Disciples campaign that's on the right-hand column of the blog, or my most recent one, or a number of my campaigns that I've had that I've done session logs for, which have been quite a number. But the other thing to understand is that Ogregate evolved over time. So when we released Ogregate, which I think was 2015 or 16, I actually don't remember. I think it might have been 16 because we put out Sartorius in 2014, and I think it was a 2-year development. And the development was even longer than that, so we were working on Ogre Gate while Sartorius was being developed, and that was also like a 2-year development period. But I released Ogre Gate reflecting how I was running it during development, but it really evolved once I started working on the Ogre Gate in book, which I started working on before we released it. So the Ogre Gate in sort of DNA is in the rule book, but it's not as readily apparent. And so the two books that I think people should get if they want to understand how the setting is meant to be run is Ogre Gate Inn in the Strange Land of Lifan and Sons of Lady 87. And I'll tell you the reason why those are both very important. Both of them reflect ways that my campaigns operate ever since it's been released. And I think you get a much better glimpse into my own campaigns through those two books than you do through the rule book alone. The other reason is one of those books leans much more heavily into the supernatural elements, the Strange Land of Lifan book, the Ogre Gate Inn book. And the other one, Sons of Lady 87, sort of de-emphasizes the supernatural elements. And my campaigns do both because a lot of times I want more human-centric, thing. It's a human-centric world, but I don't want as much supernatural stuff because I want to focus on the more wuxia components of the setting. And so I think if you look at those two books, you'll get a much clearer idea between them of the way that my campaigns operate in terms of adventure structures, in terms of how much supernatural content, and also what type of supernatural content. Because mostly what I'm drawing from is Pu Song Ling, the Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, and adjacent types of books from that period. And so, that's not quite the same as as you might see in, like, if you're just going by the Ogre Gate book, which again the setting has all that stuff, but I think Ogre Gate Inn is kind of a better reflection of the tone. And so that's what would be my recommendation. And then if I were to explain my campaign approach, I would say supernatural elements are always present. They're always in the setting, but they're scalable, and they can be downplayed or emphasized depending on what's going on. And so every once in a while, I will like to have ghost adventures, things like that. But most of the time, my campaigns are about the affairs of the martial world, about, just the characters making choices and there being consequences for those choices, that kind of thing. Sect wars, stuff that you would see in like a Chou Yuen movie. And so I think the best way that I can describe my campaigns, and again, I came up with these examples, and I'm kind of cheating in the way I do it, but there are a lot of other movies that were vying for my, to be used as examples. But because of these are ones that I kind of consistently turn back to, not just movies, but sources, this is sort of how I'm going to frame it. So my campaigns are sandboxes driven primarily by the players, the sex, and the passions of the martial world personalities. And the best way that I can sort of explain, how it is in terms of like what sources I'm drawing on and what to expect at the table is my campaigns are 2 parts Killer Clans. So if people haven't seen that, that's like the movie that you absolutely need to see if you want to understand Ogre Gate. There are other movies too, and I talk about them, and I'm always telling people to see them, but that's the one that you really, really, really need to see. So 2 parts Killer Clans, 1 part Pu Song Ling. So if you haven't read Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, if you haven't seen movies based on it, like a Chinese Ghost Story, that sort of thing, Painted Skin. Painted Skin takes more liberties, but that sort of thing. So a particular style of supernatural that's kind of unique to that part of the world. And 1 part Condor Heroes and Dragon Swamp. I'm cheating a little bit here by putting 2 things into this 1 part, but I think it's important because Condor Heroes really does have like a lot of the adventure elements, a lot of the stuff involving characters, and also just an approach to growth with player characters over time, where the acquisition of their techniques is very important. And also, I just think it's a, if you it's a really good sort of foundation for a GM to work on if they're looking for a good source for their wuxia campaign, just in terms of getting inspiration, because it's so rich. And also, you see the different kinds of adventures that are possible. And Dragon Swamp, I number one, Cheng Pei Pei is my favorite actress from the wuxia genre, and her movies were all a very big influence on Ogre Gate in many ways, in terms of the art, in terms of all sorts of things. And Dragon Swamp is one that I think straddles a very good line between sort of your more typical wuxia and more heavily leaning into the adventure and adventure type locations that can really work in a gaming context. So, I think between those sources, that really kind of helps explain things. So again, this is just me trying to clarify, because every once in a while I see posts and discussions and all these things, and usually people get things very accurate. But every once in a while I see people describe something about the game. I go, well, that's not what my intentions were, so I want to clarify that. It's not really. I'm not upset when I see it. I'm not. And if people are enjoying it, playing it that way, that's great. But I just wanted to clarify that like if I make a post, like just as another example, as a counter example to the D&D-isms, I did a wuxia sandbox series of posts, and I think I do want people to be aware that that I do run it with sandboxes, and that I wrote it with sandbox in mind, but I definitely didn't plan it so that that's what you absolutely have to do. And I've certainly run Ogre Gate campaigns that are not sandboxes. So that's there, but it's not. It's one element among many, and it's something where it's very much a matter of your taste of how you're going to engage with the setting. And again, we did. When we made the game, it was called Wandering Heroes of Ogre Gate, and there was a deliberate attempt to make sure that you could do the wandering hero. You could be Guo Jing or somebody like that, going around, on these adventures, and it's not necessarily clear from the beginning what paths the player is going to take and where they're going to end up. But I have run Ogre Gate where it's more driven by character backstory or more driven by a sequence of adventures. So there are different ways to run wuxia, and Ogre Gate, as a game book and as a setting, I want it to be able to include as many as possible. I have my own preferences, and those are sometimes reflected in the rules, but it's not. I've always told people to make it their own. When people post in our Discord and they mention like a rule that they don't understand, or they're not really vibing with the rule, they don't like the rule, I always encourage people to just change it, do it the way they want to. I think that just makes for better gaming, just because that's what tends to happen anyways. Just me, when I was growing up playing games, if we didn't like something that was one of the systems we used, eventually we would just change it to what we wanted it to be. That was pretty common. So I think that I hope I clarified, and also I do want to say I appreciate people posting about the game. I've noticed some posts and some reviews, and reviews of adjacent games like Righteous Blood, Ruthless Blades, and discussions of Strange Tales of Song Ling and Strange Tales of New England. The latter is a little bit more under the radar than the previous ones, but I always appreciate when people talk about this stuff. I'm always happy to clarify. The only thing that I would add is, a lot of times what happens is I say I'm happy to clarify, and then people ask questions, and then I realize I'm starting to do like a sage advice column thing, which is kind of bad, because number one, I'm not the most reliable person to get answers from on this matter. My players will tell you I change my mind frequently about these things, and so I think that I can give you an answer, but it's not necessarily. You're better off going to Ryan or somebody who is a little bit more of a stickler for the rule book. I've had a certain amount of drift from the rule book in my own campaigns, and so sometimes when I answer questions, I forget that. Um, but yeah. So again, yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess in terms of news, I'm working on a new setting book. I'm hoping that that's going to be slow because I have to build up the resources, and I'm not kickstarting it or anything like that. So I'm literally just investing resources in it slowly, and it's expensive to do a book, and the realities of publishing have changed a lot. And so initially, I was just going to do little tiny PDFs that were really cheap. I'm still going to do that, but I did want to get one more. It's not going to be as big as Sons of Lady 87 or anything like that, but I wanted one more substantial book, about 100 pages. And so we'll see what we can do with it. But yeah, the realities of publishing have changed a lot, and so I've had to adapt as we go. Thankfully, most of the stuff that I've really wanted to put out in terms of rule content is out there. At some point, I've always said I want to do a revision of Ogre, but at this point, I'm not so sure because it's kind of like it's already out there, it's already established, and I feel like if I went and I revised it, I might just end up changing things that people like. And if they're already tweaking it to their taste, then they're already set. So there are things about Ogre Gate I would like to revise, but I don't know that is ever going to happen. But that's sort of a dream project of mine at some distant point. And yeah, so I guess that's everything. And also check out my reviews. I've been getting some reviews up again on Eastern Kicks. And I think that the latest one is Intimate Confessions of a Chinese Courtesan, but I also should have one for the Invincible 8 coming out, and one for the sequel / remake to Intimate Confessions. And then I'm also gonna have a Killer Clans one too. I'm actually writing it. I wrote it up, and I just need to revise it. But I'm gonna have a Killer Clans review. I've reviewed that movie before, but I wanted to do like a proper review. And yeah, so obviously. What is it? Like, share, and subscribe, and all the rest. And definitely, if you buy one of our games and you like it, it's really helpful if you talk about it. If you just mention it to people, if you review, because it is all pretty much word of mouth at this point. Every once in a while, I'll take out a small ad here or there, but ads are not what they used to be. In terms of the reach. It's harder to reach everybody when you do ads now. So you're always kind of targeting smaller audiences, which so you kind of do it selectively. Yeah. Oh, and there's a Ogre Gate adventure out in the Red Room magazine. I did an Ogre Gate adventure, and it's up there. It's a really good one too, so I think people should check it out. There's also a preview, in a way, of the setting book because the adventure is set in a town in the setting book I'm working on. So, all right, I will talk to you later.